Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mark Leisure. I'm the Vice President of the Illinois State Association of Letter Carriers. And on behalf of President Rivas, I'd like to welcome you all to Lisle. Thank you for coming out for this presentation and discussion on the tentative agreement. Help yourself to the food in the back. And without any further delay, Michael Kraft.
All right. All right. So thanks to the Illinois State Association. They got some food for you guys, and they have this event, and then we'll have another one in Bloomington tomorrow. So I'm going to have a handout for you guys, which is going to be the stuff that's up on the screen, but it's running off right now. So give that a minute, but you're not losing anything because it'll be up on the screen, anything that's in the handout. We are filming this so that after this, we can release the entirety of the thing onto YouTube, or make a link for it for the people that aren't here, which is the majority in this case. I tried to turn up the heat over there, but I'm not sure if I was successful. They say it's like 65 degrees in here, so that's pretty much mailman weather, so we should be fine, I think. But if you need to get up and do jumping jacks or any type of calisthenics, that'll be fine. If you eat and you find yourself nodding off, especially when we start going over some of the more intricate economic numbers, please just stand up, walk around, do whatever you want to do. As we go along, you may have things you want to talk about. You guys can't talk at the same time. It's not going to work. Sorry. I don't know how the sound works, but I can hear everything. It echoes, or it's something. It does something where if you're whispering to the person next to you, it sounds loud, all the way up here. But anyway, so as we go along, if you have questions, comments, or things you want to talk about related to that particular handout, slide, or that particular topic, just do it at that time. We don't need to wait until the end to get into that. I'm going to cover, so we have a choice to make on whether or not we want to ratify this contract or not. So every active carrier, we'll go over the first slide is the constitutional language, so we'll go over that first. But basically, every active carrier can vote and determine if we want to accept the terms of the contract or not. There's a lot of terms in this contract, so you'll get a copy. It's already been posted since October 19th, I think it was. The tentative agreement, it's a summary of the tentative agreement itself. So most of you have already looked it over and you've seen what it looks like. We're giving you a handout here today. You look at it. What I'm saying is you may have questions or things you want to talk about the different articles and the different technical aspects of the contract that I'm probably not going to cover. What I'm going to cover is the economics of the contract and comparing it to what we think the contract should be. So obviously in any contract, you don't get everything that you want, but we want to be able to gauge, is this thing acceptable? Should we recommend voting yes or voting no based on, the economics of the contract? The reason I say the economics is because all of the things could possibly be up for, if we go to arbitration, everything will be on the table, right? But the way the arbitration process works is there's 3 parties at the arbitration hearing. It's a tripartite arbitration hearing. The NELC has a arbitrator, the Postal Service has an arbitrator, and then there's a neutral arbitrator. And a lot of the language, contract language, that has already been agreed to by both parties is likely going to be agreed to by the neutral arbitrator because 2 out of 3 have already agreed to that language. So, yeah, we want to understand what all of that means. Let's say like the changes in Article 8. So if you guys want to talk about that stuff, I'm here for you, no problem. We can talk about it. But to me, that stuff's going in the contract either way. What we need to do at this time is figure out if we want to vote yes or vote no on the tentative agreement. If we vote no, we'll have the opportunity to take our case in front of that neutral arbitrator to try to get better economic terms. But we'll probably end up with the exact same terms as far as all of the other things that have already been agreed to by the parties. Monica, you had a question? No, you can. Anything can be opened up. But process-wise, that has been, you're talking about the change in the fixed office time. Well, the potential change in the fixed office time. That has been agreed to by the NELC and the United States Postal Service. I don't see how it's going to come out any different, but it could. I'm not saying it can't, but I don't see that being a logical outcome. I do think that there is a good chance that we could get different or better economic terms if we went in front of an arbitrator. But the other stuff will probably be the same. Cece?
So my question was, you were saying that the things that they're agreeing on will probably still get, so it couldn't get worse. Is that what you're?
I think so. You have, let's say, a change in the Article 8 language. I think that change will be implemented into the new contract, whether we ratified the agreement, the tentative agreement, and then obviously whatever, you can only vote yes or no. So if we vote yes on the tentative agreement, then that language becomes part of the contract. Let's say we vote no on the tentative agreement. Then that language becomes part of the contract through the arbitration panel. Most likely, right? That would be my opinion on that. Melissa?
Has he said anything about when they're actually going to propose full language of the agreement?
Yes.
In the members?
The president, well, I don't know if it's going to go in the members portal or not. So traditionally, when you get the ballot to vote, once again, it's a yes or no vote. You'll get a copy of the summary, which is already out, and you'll also get the complete contract itself with all of the new proposed language. So new language would be in bold, new memorandum would be added, that kind of thing. Traditionally, they've mailed out that real thin, long contract, tentative agreement thing. You guys kind of nodding your heads. If you've been around a while, you know what that looks like. It's impossible to read because in order for it to fit in the envelope, they got to make the print like 2 font or something like that. And to me, it's useless. So what I think they're going to do, and President Renfro still hasn't named the balloting committee. He had indicated he would probably do that this past week, but he did not. So we're anticipating that happening this week coming up. The balloting committee would make the final decision on that, but most likely we'll get the tentative agreement summary along with a QR code that will take you either to a spot on the NELC website or in the members only portal where you can view the entire contract, the actual language, this and that. As far as a time frame when that would be released, is going to be released prior to you having to vote. But the president hasn't committed to releasing it anytime before that. All right. Yeah, I knew there was one more question. Go ahead, Andre.
So you're saying that he agreed to this already?
I think that's what's going to be the case. Now, so in this question came up, so the NELC had 4 rap sessions basically last week. One was in Houston, one was in San Francisco, one was in Minneapolis, and one was in Washington, D.C. So, I got to hear from the president a lot. And, if we voted no, one of the questions came up, how would he know, the president, as our chief negotiator, what are the things we didn't like about it that caused us to vote no? So it's very, there's a lot of ways to try to do that, but, maybe there'll be some type of survey or something, maybe it's like you write a letter to the president. Maybe you do something at your branch meeting where, we think this should be changed or something like that. I just don't, we just went through 20 months of tireless negotiating, and I just don't see any way that the technical parts of the contract that have been agreed to and ironed out and gone back and forth over that time that both parties agreed to. That doesn't mean you and I agreed to them, right? But the people we elected and the representatives of the United States Postal Service, our president on our side, on their side is normally the vice president in charge of labor relations who heads up their negotiating team. If they've agreed to something already, you know, you can definitely make your voice heard. But for the purposes here today, I'm going to focus on the economic stuff, which is where I think we can do a lot better in this contract. But it's going to be up to the members of the union what they want to do. And it's a decision you have to make, going to arbitration or accepting the terms. And there's arguments on both sides, you know. But as we go through this thing, you'll hopefully have more information and more understanding on what are the possibilities, what is a realistic expectation versus what have we agreed to now, and do we think that that's sufficient versus what our expectations are and what we realistically think we can accomplish. And I got my opinion. Obviously, you guys can hear it throughout the, you know, you'll hear my opinion, but you know, I get one vote. President Renfro gets one vote. Every active member of the union gets one vote, and we'll go from there. Lawrence, you had a question?
I was just going to say, the Article 8, as far as the list, would be one that's least likely to be changed, because that was part of a resolution at the last convention. So membership already spoken.
Yeah. There's a few changes in Article 8. And like I say, so if you guys want to talk about any of those things, I'm cool with that, because whether we vote yes or no, my opinion is going to be in the contract anyway, so you're going to have to understand the terms, what they are. So anything you want to talk about in relation to any of the changes in Article 8 or in any other parts of the contract is fine. But you'll see how I got this thing laid out, and we'll go through. And as we go through, if you have things related to the slides you see and the things you have in your handout, just jump in. And if you want to talk about anything else afterwards, then do that. Time-wise, well, here today, we're here up until 6 or until we exhaust our Q&A. You got something?
So you said because both sides agreed to something that we can't open it back up, but both sides agreed to the 1.3%. So
Yeah, so
why is it everything back on the table?
everything is on the table from a legal standpoint. If we vote no on the contract, there is no contract. There's no agreement. None of the things in the tentative agreement are agreed to if the vote is no. So you're absolutely correct.
That 13 minutes, that's a lot. It's a lot of
I got you.
time you're gonna lose.
Well, the specific language in that thing is that if there was a joint agreement on a route evaluation and adjustment process, if there's a joint agreement, they will apply the following fixed office time standards in that agreement. So you're not actually voting on that anyway. The reason I say that is because if there's a joint agreement on route evaluations and adjustments, the language contained in that joint agreement would be whatever is agreed to by the president of the NELC and the vice president of labor relations for the United States Postal Service anyway, regardless of what that particular memorandum says. I just, to me, it's very in the history of arbitrations that we've had since 1971, both parties have always focused on the economic issues, and it's very unlikely that if we vote this thing down and we go to arbitration, that we're going to deviate from that tradition. And so I think we may be able to get better than 1.3%, but some of the other things are probably just going to be signed off on. But, you know, hey, it's a democratic organization. Feel free to make your voice heard on the things that you don't like or you think should not be in a new contract. We certainly do not have to agree to anything if we go to arbitration. But you have an opinion, this other person has an opinion, this other person has an opinion. We elected a president to represent us in the collective bargaining process. No, we elected a president to represent us in the collective bargaining process. And as long as he's our president, he has the authority and the responsibility to try to make determinations on what is in our best interest. But we can vote on this contract. So that's from the Constitution. Time-wise, before I get off on something else, we expect the ballots to go out probably closer to December the 1st. Like I said, the balloting committee has not even been formed. They think that they'll need a couple weeks to, kind of gather the documents, the envelopes, and then they'll start mailing out the ballots west to east. So the ballots will go out to California first and work their way backwards. There'll probably be something like a 28-day time frame from when the ballots go out till when you have to return the ballots. The anticipated time frame is basically the month of December, and then we'll get a result probably in early January. And that's just an estimate until the balloting committee actually puts out exact dates. We'll let you guys know. But that's just an estimate there. Cece, you had some?
So that's what I was just asking. It didn't work, like the economical part of the 1.3%. They couldn't go back in and get 1%.
You could get 0%. You could get a 10% pay cut. There is, if we vote no, there is no contract. And so there's no terms. There's no starting point. There's no anything.
So in your
Well, we get in.
opinion, you think that
We'll get into my opinion, and my opinion is, I hope, based on an educated guess. And that's why I'm going to present to you guys some information, and then, we'll see where we want to go from there. All right. So the language from the Constitution is up on the screen. You guys have it in front of you. You guys have a handout in front of you? Yes? Okay. All right. So the first one, this is Article 16 language. Section 1, ratification shall be by a mail referendum vote, and the ballot shall be mailed only to regular members of the NELC. The regular members in this case are active city letter carriers. Those members of the NELC that shown by the records of the National Secretary Treasurer as of 90 days prior to the date that the proposed agreement is reached. That date was October the 17th. Yes, no? It was a Friday, 18th. October the 18th. So 90 days prior to October the 18th, if you were a member of the NELC and an active letter carrier, you would get a ballot. Okay? We good on that? Membership, acceptance, or rejection of a proposed national agreement shall be by a majority of valid ballots returned by the voters. When such a majority votes to accept a proposed agreement, no other action shall be required by the union membership because it's over. That's our contract. By a majority, if they vote yes, we vote yes, then it's a done deal. When the majority of total votes cast is for rejection, the NELC negotiator shall inform the USPS and reopen negotiations within 5 days after the vote is tallied. If negotiations are not reopened, the NELC negotiators shall determine if there will be binding arbitration, an immediate work stoppage, or a designated job action. If negotiations are reopened, they will not exceed a period of 15 days, 15 calendar days, at which time a second ballot would be mailed if we get an agreement during that time. If not, then the national president will once again determine if there'll be binding arbitration, an immediate work stoppage, or a designated job action. President Renfro has already indicated that he will inform if we vote no. If we vote yes, that's it. That's our contract. If we vote no, he has 5 days to inform the Postal Service that we want to reopen negotiations. He'll do that. There's a 15-day period. He doesn't anticipate any movement during that 15-day period. He deems that as unlikely, but we'll make an effort and we'll see what happens during that 15-day period. If there's another agreement during the 15-day period, it goes out for a new vote to all the members again. If not, then we go to binding arbitration. He's already said that he will not be calling for an immediate work stoppage or any other designated job action. We will go to binding arbitration. And I think that's it, okay? Any questions on the constitutional language? Good. Melissa?
Yes, I heard you said, post office had already told them that if you vote it down, they will not go back in the.
All I know is kind of what I just said, which is that President Renfro indicated that he didn't think it would be likely that there would be a new agreement in the 15-day new negotiating period. So
They don't have to go into that.
that I don't know, because that would come from the Postal Reorganization Act. That would come from the law, whether or not the 15-day period is required or not. I'm not sure if it is or it isn't, but either way, it doesn't, if either side doesn't want to renegotiate the terms, then they just go to binding arbitration. It has to be a mutual agreement at that point, or at any point, really, right? So then, we can assume that if we vote this thing down, we're going to arbitration. I would just leave it at that. Monica.
So, we need to look at what the clerks are getting now, because obviously.
We're going to get into that. Now we're talking. All right. We're going to get into that. All right. So the law. So when we look at the contract, every union, every workforce has a criteria, right? And you say, well, how much do we deserve? Or how much, I work hard. How much should I get paid? Or whatever, right? You have to be able to gauge if you think your compensation or your pay is adequate, yes or no. So when we look at the terms in the tentative agreement, we're going to frame it the same way that the law frames it. And our brothers and sisters went out on strike in 1970, and they changed the law. Prior to 1970, it was the collective begging period. We worked for the government itself, the U.S. Post Office. If we wanted a raise, we had to go to Congress. And after they went out on strike, they changed the law. And one of the major points of the strike was that they were underpaid versus regular, other people in the private sector. So the law says that as an employer, the Postal Service shall achieve and maintain compensation for its officers and employees comparable to the rates and types of compensation paid in the private sector of the economy of the United States. It shall place particular emphasis upon opportunities for career advancements of all officers and employees and the achievement of worthwhile and satisfying careers in the service of the United States. So the first thing that most of us look at and what's going to be relevant is our pay and benefits comparable to that in the private sector? And it's not defined. Most of the time, or logically, if you had to do a one-on-one comparison, and we'll do that a little bit later, you would compare us to UPS drivers. It's a comparable job. It's a national contract. They wear a uniform that's brown. We wear a uniform that's blue. They got a union. We got a union. That kind of thing. They drive a truck. We drive a truck. There's a lot of comparability there. But the law doesn't specifically say you're going to compare to a particular employee or job. It just says to the private sector of the economy of the United States. So the comparability could be like, what is the median income in America, And we know that, with inflation and with a lot of the job actions that were taken and a lot of the movement with the unions, we know that workers in this country have gotten a lot of raises, significant raises, over the past couple of years. So that bodes well for us when we go into an arbitration proceeding. The other thing is the achievement of worthwhile and satisfying careers. and you get into an arbitration hearing and you can present information to the neutral arbitrator or to the arbitration panel. And one of the things would be that the rate of people applying for the job, the rate of veterans coming out of the military and applying for the job, and the rate of retention after someone has been hired as a letter carrier is all down tremendously. So the whole idea that the law had, a Postal Reorganization Act, that it would achieve worthwhile and satisfying careers, the evidence is that it's not accomplishing that. So if it's not accomplishing that, how can we alter the terms of the contract so that we can accomplish that, right? Make it a job that people want. Make it a career job that people stand in line for and work 30, 40 years at. So now, one of the things, it's not in the law. It is not in the law, just so you understand. But one of the things that we're worried about is the finances of the Postal Service. And if you skip a slide, I got to do this myself, right? How do you do it? Just like this? Okay. If you skip a slide and you go to this one on the economics, this is something I pulled from the PRC, Postal Regulatory Commission, and it shows the post office's reported financial outlook for the past 10 years. And this is one of the concerns that we would have about going to arbitration, because the Postal Service is almost certainly going to argue that, they'd love to give us a decent salary, but unfortunately we're broke. Obviously the numbers may or may not be legitimate. There's a lot of debate about the authenticity of the numbers, but you can just see where it's at. Now, one point of irony in this is that we got the Postal Reform Act passed in 2022. And if you look at fiscal year 2022, Postal Service presented a much better economic outlook in 2022 than any of the other years. And fiscal year 2022, it ends September 30th of 2022. The fiscal year 2023 report doesn't come out until after September 30th of 2023. It will come out a couple months later. They haven't even released the financial report for fiscal year 2024 yet, right? So the irony is that when our contract expired May 20th of 2023, the numbers that the Postal Service had reported in the previous fiscal year, which would have been fiscal year 2022, were actually not that bad. And if we think that a major concern in going to arbitration is going to be the economic situation of the Postal Service, then we most certainly should have went to arbitration, last summer when we had the opportunity, as of July 20th of 2023. But you can't rewind the clock. It is what it is. Go back one slide, you guys. And I got this. I pulled this from the Goldberg Arbitration Award, which was when the APWU, the one before that contract, their 2018 contract, they went in front of an arbitrator in 2020. Well, in 2019, but they got the award in 2020. This thing is dated March 10th of 2020. And, you can look at the finances and see at that time when they were in the hearing in 2019 that the post office obviously had a lot of negative losses and a bad economic outlook. And here's what the neutral arbitrator of that panel said at that time. He said, as for the evidence and argument put forth by the parties with respect to the Postal Service's financial condition and the effect that should have on the award, I shall be brief, real brief. This issue was discussed and resolved in this panel's 2016 award and need not be discussed again. For the reasons stated in the 2016 award, I do not view the Postal Service's financial condition as calling for a modification or rejection of the statutory comparability standard. And what that means is This arbitrator said, once again, second time, I'm going to follow the law and figure out, are the wages and benefits comparable to those in the private sector? I'm not going to consider the financial condition of the Postal Service. And that makes sense. When they went on a strike, they didn't say, the government has more money, they should give us more of it. They said, we deserve to be paid what is comparable to that in other jobs that don't have the legal right to strike, like we don't. Melissa?
I also think it's important to state that buying into this fallacy that they're losing money is buying into whatever their accounting is. And also how they choose to spend their money.
Yes.
The idea of DeJoy sinking all this money in this 10-year plan, which seems, at this point at least, appears to be a boondoggle that is not going to result in the savings. So we're allowing them to sink probably billions of dollars into this reorganization, and at the same time, then let them claim, oh, we don't have any money for you.
Right. And not just that, but if we accept that the Postal Service can spend money however they want to, and then if they don't have any money left over for us, we just got to take the L, that would be a ridiculous position and definitely not in line with the motivation behind the strike in 1970. And today, there's so many things about the economics of the Postal Service. One, you never trust their numbers. But two, how much money do they waste? Like, there's probably twice as many supervisors now doing nothing, having no value and purpose, because a letter carrier operates, based on the M41. We don't operate based on, their harassment or whatever. So what value is it to have more and more supervisors micromanaging every moment of every single day? It makes the job less desirable, and it adds no value to the bottom line. And so if the Postal Service decides they want to spend a bunch of money on supervisors, and they want to waste a bunch of money in the grievance process, and they want to understaff the offices and then have to pay overtime and penalty overtime, how is it logical that we then conclude, oh, okay, well, I guess you don't have no money for us? That I don't think is something that we can accept. I don't think that has a legal justification, and I don't think that that's an argument that they'll win at arbitration. So if we do decide to go to arbitration, I think that's one that we would be able to win based on the precedent that's already been set. Monica?
So if we do go to arbitration, do we have a right to forensic accounting to see where they're spending and where they're wasting their money?
Yes. Yes, you do. You have a right to discovery and to.
Will they do that though? Or is he just a yes person that's gonna be like, oh yeah?
I don't know the answer to that.
Is somebody going with him or is he by himself?
So the arbitration is, the president is over collective bargaining. We have attorneys, economists, we have all type of people that are on staff of the NELC that work for us, that have done this, many times in the past. So it's a group effort under the direction of the president. That's all I can say.
So you got $175,000 performance bonus for what?
Yeah, $175,000 is not going to get us a raise.
He spent $80 million, so he's gonna train his supervisors.
I got you. I would hope that we would take the position that we're only wasting the neutral arbitrator's time by presenting a bunch of economic arguments back and forth. And if we can get agreement on that, then we don't even have to go down that road. I think that would be ideal, to just not even make that part of the discussion at the arbitration hearing. But that would either have to be by agreement of the parties, or it'd have to be by a mandate from the neutral arbitrator. We don't know. But, according to the precedent, it's really off the table. So I don't know how far deep we need to get into it if it doesn't have any relevancy.
I mean, if supervisors and clerks can get a raise, certainly carriers who are doing the bulk of the work. It doesn't make any sense.
All right. I agree. You had something? You good?
I was just asking, similar to what she was asking, but if you go with, I think you explained it earlier, but I forget. Would it be a team? Will it be some checks and balances with the president? Because we didn't been without contract all this time, and we get 1.3%. So it seems like we need some, just to make sure.
Oh,
Nobody's going to.
you're not gonna get an argument from me. It's, I think the process, the negotiating process has been horrible. I think that the fact that the executive board has been excluded for the most part. I mean, I personally haven't had any involvement in the collective bargaining process since March of 2023. Most of my colleagues on the executive council would tell you the same thing. I'm not saying without exception, but the president, under the terms of our Constitution, and you know, I think it will come up in 2026 at the next convention, but under the terms of the Constitution, the president utilizes the resources and the people that he or she sees fit to utilize during the collective bargaining process and during the arbitration process. So the only thing I can say to that, I'm not trying to be funny here, but for those of you that were at the convention in Boston, President Renfro did pretty good. He can hold his own up there, you know? It wasn't like they stumped him or anything. So I have confidence that if we went to arbitration, that he would put on a great case for us. I think we got a lot of good arguments, and I think he would do a great job for us. But that's just my opinion, and I wish the process had more of a collective, collaborative approach. I wish there were more checks and balances built into it and ways for more people to have input into our strategy and you know, kind of what we're doing at each step in the process. But that's just not what the Constitution says at this point. Bill? Yeah. No, I don't know. The clerks probably would compare themselves to like the economy of the private sector. So like, let's say wages in the past 5 years have gone up by 12%, you know, something like that. I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah, not in that contract, I don't think, but in the subsequent one. Right. All right, we're gonna get into the clerk contract. The comparison between the NALC contract and tentative agreement and the APW clerk contract is there's a lot of comparisons there. We'll definitely get into that. Go ahead, brother.
Why do this president think 1.3 is good enough for us to ratify this contract? And every other company out here getting 20%, and he decides 1.3 is good enough.
So,
because the last time we got a raise, that was 1.3. He said that that's the best that we ever received from the postal service.
so let's go a little bit out of order and pull up this slide, because I want to get back to the Teamsters and UPS, but go to this slide, pay raises in the TA versus inflation. And so it's not a 1.3% pay raise. What it is in the tentative agreement is a 1.3% raise in addition to the cost of living allowances that come twice a year in this contract and most every other contract that I can remember. It's been a long time. Now, the COLA is off of the CPIW, which is consumer price, one of the consumer price indexes, right? But it's not 100% of the rate of inflation. It's not 100% of the increase in that consumer price index. It's like half. So traditionally, to your point, where we've gotten 1.3% raises and the rate of inflation is say 2%, we're getting 1.3 and we're getting like, let's say another percent or something in the COLA, and we're kind of keeping up with inflation. So this chart, what I wanted to show you guys is that because the rate of inflation has been like between 4 and 8%, you know, in the last 3 years or so, because the rate of inflation is so much higher than what it traditionally was, we would need to negotiate higher pay raises in order to keep up with the rate of inflation. The 1.3% does not keep up with the rate of inflation. So I go back to August of 2019. You look at the top there, the first column there is August of 2019 salary, and that was what we made in August of 2019. August of 2019 was the last pay increase that we got under the terms of the previous contract. After that, starting in September of 2019, that's the contract we're working under right now. The September of 2019 to May of 2023 contract is the one we're working under now because there hasn't been a new contract yet, right? Once we get a new contract, then we'll move forward. So if you go back to 2019, prior to the pandemic, and you look at what that was before the rate of inflation went up so much, but it was also before the pandemic. And, you know, we all remember what happened during the pandemic. I don't want to exaggerate that, you know, but we were out there and it was dangerous. And, you know, the danger on the street has increased since 2019 as well. The number of carriers getting a gun put to their head has increased. You know, the number of heat illness injuries has increased. And, you know, in the pandemic, we never got any hazard pay or whatever. We were told we were essential. And we just would think, I guess what I'm saying, August of 2019 has got to be the baseline for pay for a city letter carrier. It shouldn't be any lower. It should go up from there based on the dangers of the job, based on the fact that we're essential, and, you know, based on the rate of inflation. But if you look at every step in the pay chart, if you compare it to what our pay would be if you just applied the rate of inflation. So the first one is what was our pay in August of 2019. The second row is what would our pay be if you just applied the rate of inflation without any adjustments. And then the third row is what is our actual salary in September of 2024 under this tentative agreement. It is less, the third row is less than the second row. So our pay in the tentative agreement is not keeping up with the rate of inflation. The difference you can see is in the negative. It's in the red up there on your screen for every, you know, at every step. Now, I went ahead because in this tentative agreement, there is a 1.3% general wage increase, retroactive to November of last year, a 1.3% pay raise, which will go into effect this month, November of 2024. And then there's another 1.3% raise in November of 2025, plus the cost of living allowances twice per year. And then there's a little extra, there's a big or a little, depending on where you're at. There's a little extra, and that extra is that within 180 days of us, if we do ratify the contract, they will eliminate steps AA, A, and B, and step C would be the starting pay. So obviously, if you're in one of those steps, when you factor in versus the rate of inflation, then you're getting a raise, a significant raise, even versus inflation. But at the top step, we would be getting an extra $1,000. So if you look at P all the way on the right, and you show the second to the bottom there, that row that says August 2019 salary with inflation in June of 2025. And I just use June of 2025 because it says within 180 days of ratification. So if we ratified it, it would be in January. Move forward 6 months, I guess it would be around then. The pay would be $81,922, and that's with a projected COLA in the spring of 2025 as well. But you look at that number, 81,922. It is, if you that inflation number is still less than the number right above that. I mean, it's still less than. No, is it more or less? Why does it say negative? TA salary within 180 days if ratified. The salary would be $81,196. Yeah, it's less. So within 180 days of ratification, with the $1,000, right? Our salary at the top step at that time would be $81,186. You guys see that? if you just applied the rate of inflation all the way through, and I had to estimate because we don't know what the rate of inflation will be in 2025, but I estimated it. We use the same estimations to determine the cost of living allowance. So, I mean, you got to estimate something. But if you estimated out the rate of inflation, the salary would be $81,922. So even with the additional $1,000, what I'm saying is we're still not even keeping up with inflation. And all the other steps of the pay scale are significantly less than the rate of inflation. So long story short, do I think the 1.3% is sufficient? No, I don't. Do I think we can do a little bit better at arbitration? Yeah, I think we could. Monica?
So I guess I'm looking at the clerks and they get their full COLA.
We're going back to the clerks, Monica. We'll get there.
I know, because you know what? If I was grateful, I would have started right there. He was there to step up from that point. And he didn't. He couldn't even get what they got.
So I agree with that. So my opinion, and like I said, this is just my opinion. Everyone has theirs, but I think it's pretty reasonable to say that if you look at a contract for city letter carriers, obviously we would compare ourselves to UPS drivers because they make significantly more money than we do. So you look at the chart up there, the UPS drivers, they start where we end. Right now our top pay is like $37, something like that. That's where they start as a driver. Within 4 years, they go up. The top pay, the average top pay is listed on the chart here. As of right now, it's $45 an hour. In 2027, it'll go up to $49 an hour. And it only takes 4 years to get there. So over a 30-year career or whatever, significantly more money for a UPS driver than a city letter carrier. Now, it's pay and benefits, right? And we get certain benefits that they may not get. If you flip over to the next page, just for comparison purposes, wanted to show you guys, you could pull up your own 2024 personal statement of benefits. This adds up to $142,000. UPS, if you go on their website, they say the average wage and compensation for their drivers is $145,000. So you say 142 is kind of close, except this is a top pay letter carrier. This is a letter carrier that has more than 15 years in. So the average pay and benefits for UPS workers is $145,000. We get close, $142,000 in the same ballpark, but only after going up all the way through the pay scale. So I think if you compare our pay and benefits in, currently or in the tentative agreement, you would see that they're at a much higher level than us. So now you look at what is the post office going to say? The post office is going to argue the pattern of USPS employees. And traditionally, and if you look at the last contract that the APW agreed to, they agreed to 1.3% each year. And they agreed to a lot of the similar terms that we have in the tentative agreement. I call this thing a clerk contract because there's so many of the terms that are just duplicated directly from the last APW contract. Now, I don't think we could do less than the APW contract. I don't see how any neutral arbitrator would say the city letter carrier is going to make less than a clerk. And I say that for two reasons. One, if you look at the APW pay chart, which you have an example, you have the pay chart in there, right? We take it out? It's in there. Okay, we're going to get to it. Right there. Okay. So you see the steps in there. Steps 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Step level 6, I guess it is a clerk pay. And if you go to 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, you're talking about other classifications of USPS employees, right? You're talking about mechanics. You're talking about truck drivers. If you go down, you're talking about maybe a custodian or something, right? So the APW negotiates for various crafts. And all of their crafts are not paid the same amount. So if you were to accept the argument that, no, don't compare us to UPS, even though the law says compare us to the economy of the private sector, I think that's a good argument for us. But if you went with the baseline, the bottom, you'd say, no, we're going to compare you to what has been agreed to over the years, either by us or by other crafts, right? They talk a lot about the pattern of contracts that have been agreed to, either between the rural carriers, the APW, the mail handlers, or the NELC and the Postal Service. And you look at it, you wouldn't say that our pay should be equivalent to the clerks. It has to be higher because there's no doubt that we work harder. We're out there in the elements. We're the face of the organization. We wear the uniform. Clerk work is light duty for us, right? Carrier work is harder. It has more responsibility to it, whatever. And so maybe we would be at, compare us to, say, level 8 on this chart or something like that, right? But you can see that, like, if we took level 8, for example, they start at 63,000 and go up to 79,000. So that is higher than what the clerks get. So the way I frame this contract in my mind is, if we vote this thing down and we go to arbitration, we will end up somewhere between what clerks get and what UPS drivers get. And if we end up there, we're going to be significantly higher than where we're at right now, because if you look at that next chart there, where is it? Now go up. You see the breakdown? The cumulative review. If you look at the cumulative review, this is a little chart we came up with. So I think you mentioned this, Monica. There's differences in our current pay chart and in the tentative agreement and the APW clerk pay chart. So they start off slightly higher and they end up pretty significantly lower than where we're at. But it's not that clear because there are clerks that were grandfathered in prior to the 2012 or 2011 agreement that make the same amount as us at the top level. Remember, the top level is very important, because the top level is, if you have a career with the Postal Service, the top level is what you're going to make for the majority of your career. And also, the top level is what they're going to use to determine your high 3 when you go into retirement. So the fact that our top level for any carrier that started after 2012, in our case, anyone that came in after the DOS award, for that group of people, the fact that our pay is higher than the clerks at the top step is very significant, and it's something that we don't want to just throw to the side. However, there's certain advantages in the APW contract that we don't have. It's a higher starting pay. There are 36 weeks between steps. We are 46 weeks between steps. And so what that means is, after 36 weeks, they're getting a raise, and we're still at the same step that we were at until 10 more weeks comes, and then we get a raise. And so you leapfrog. Now, because there's more distance to cover between our bottom and our top, those raises that we're getting are more significant than the raises that the clerk is getting under the APW contract. The other significant difference is that in their contract, they get a full cost of living allowance. Whatever that number is, it gets applied to every step in their pay scale, whereas we get a prorated cost of living allowance and is applied at a % at every step. So what this chart is going to show you, and we went ahead and projected out to 2025. And so we're looking at the starting pay, which after 180 days after ratification, if we ratify the contract, 180 days afterwards, they will change starting pay to Step C. And Step C will go up because Step C will have gotten 1.3% in 2023, 1.3% in 2024, all the cost of living increases from the end of 2023 to 2 ones in 2024, and the cost of living raise in March or the spring of 2025. To make it fair, we looked at the APWU and we took their current pay, but of course their contract just expired. So we're looking at the clerk pay and we're adding on a projected general wage increase of 1.3% in November, and we're adding on cost of living allowance in 2025. And if you do that, their starting pay would be $55,981. So that's an idea of where they'll be at for starting pay in, say the summer of 2025. Our starting pay would be less at $53,660. So at that time, or at any time really, if you started off as a career clerk, you're making more than a career carrier, which is crazy. And it would take you 6 years going through the pay scale before you guys see the 6 years where it's kind of circled. At that point, it would even out. And then, after 6 years, now we start making more money than them. We even added up over a lifetime. If you did a 30 years and you worked all 30 years as a clerk, you'd end up with $2,092,000. If you did all 30 years as a carrier, worked your ass off a lot harder, you'd end up with $2,267,000. But I think we have a strong argument that our starting pay has to be higher than a clerk starting pay, because it just doesn't make any sense that a person should be able to say, I'll go work as a clerk in the beginning part of my career, and then I'll come to be a carrier later on, and I'll make more money that way, but I won't have the wear and tear on my body that I would have as a city carrier. You got to pay a city carrier for the city carrier work that they're doing. So I think what this chart shows is that even the starting pay with the elimination of step AA, A, and B is still not high enough. It's still not high enough. And there's some pluses and minuses to the APWU contract, the clerk contract, but generally, it ends up being weighing about the same, right? If you put them both on a scale, you're kind of weighing about the same. And once again, I think we have a very strong argument that if they can pay the clerks this, if they can pay the clerks right here, then they can pay us right here, and the tentative agreement doesn't get us there. And that's why I think that we can do a little bit better in arbitration. Monica and then Bill.
Hasn't an arbitrator already said that carriers deserve more?
Yes, I'm sorry. That was the second reason. In 1999, so we used to bargain jointly with the APWU. And in 1999, we had separated. We were doing our own bargaining. And at the time, the pay scales had not been changed. So basically, we were at the same rate of pay as an APW clerk. And in 1999, we told the Postal Service that's not good enough. We got to be at a higher scale. The same thing. We work harder. The job is harder. We're the face of the organization. And the arbitrator, Fleischle, agreed with us and upped our pay, maybe like 5% above what the APW clerks were getting. And over time, that has reversed itself, partially because of the fact that they're getting the full COLA in their contract. And as inflation goes up, if you got a full COLA, it drastically alters their pay scale. So I think that's another strong argument in our favor that an arbitrator has already ruled that carriers work harder and deserve more. How can it be fair that we have a contract that is so similar to APW clerks? I think that's a good argument in our favor as well. Bill?
They were trying to argument with the COLA difference that the APW took the lower salary and kept the regular COLA. Took the higher salary, you got the reduced COLA.
We took a higher ending salary, which is more important than a beginning salary over a career. And we took a prorated COLA. Their bargain is that they have a full COLA, but at least the people that started after 2012 as career APW members do not reach the top that we do.
They were arguing that they were
Right.
And Goldberg said, no, that wouldn't be fair to these other unions.
Right.
But most of the argument that the unions that give up something, get that, they want to give them both.
Right. Melissa?
I think people should understand really how unfair this prorated or reduced COLA is as you go down the pay scale. Because first of all, COLAs are not raises. COLA is just something to help you maintain your wage rate when prices start increasing. You have some increase in your limited purchasing. So if you gave everyone the same amount of money for the COLA, the people who are getting paid less, when they pay higher for gas, groceries, rent, living expenses, they're taking a greater percentage of their salary to cover those things than someone who makes more money than them at a higher level. So if anything, the people on the lower level of the pay scale would need a higher percentage of COLA to keep up with the cost of living. So this idea that we would allow people who are already underpaid to then get a substandard COLA is really ridiculous. I don't think people have really thought about the fact that the percentage of their wages that are going to the higher cost of living is significant. We already are the worst, postal workers are the worst industry for keeping up with inflation from 2013. Inflation increased 31%, while our wages only increased about 18%, which with statistics I've seen shows that our profession is actually suffered from inflation more than any other profession out there. So,
Well, our pay was drastically cut in 2013, and so let's look before we move on. Let's look at the current pay chart. So that's our current pay chart, and so you can see where if we were still in table 1, we would be starting off at like $30 an hour. What's that number? 60? Is that 60,000? 62.
The glasses, Michael.
Yeah, I need to make it big. So the old pay chart. So there's one of our goals in this round of collective bargaining was to bring everyone into one pay chart, and yeah. The way we accomplished that was to put everyone in table 2, and I heard from President Renfro's mouth that he thought that the structure in table 2 is actually to our benefit, and I had the same reaction that you had, Monica. I was like, what? So I hit the wrong button here? Yeah. So the table 1 pay chart was advantageous in a lot of ways. And one of the ways obviously was that the starting pay was higher. But another one of the ways is that you had significant pay increases at the beginning of the pay scale. Like if you look at A and then you look at D, A is 62 and D is 69,000. You guys see that? And so within 3 steps, you went up by 7,000. If you look at table 2, you got 46 and you go to D and it's 52. It's not as much of an increase. The increases were more front loaded in the table 1 contract. The table 2 setup is all of the raises are prorated throughout. And the reason why they set that up is so that they could have the COLAs as prorated, and it would always be, every raise you get is identical in the table 2 pay chart. Each one, if it's mostly about $2,000 or about $1 an hour at each step. But before it wasn't like that. You'd get a big step increase in the beginning, and then you'd get smaller increases as you go on. But of course, you already had that money. That money was already in your pocket and you were earning a higher salary at each point. And so you only went up by a incremental amount, and it didn't matter. So like, for example, when you look at the addition of step P, which came into our last contract, the addition of step P, had it been in the table 2 chart, the addition of step P would have got us an additional, if you look, the difference between N and O is like $2,000. You guys see that? All of the steps in table 2 are like $2,000. So had we got the similar increase to P, we would have got a $2,000 raise from O to P, but instead they gave the increase in table 1, which at the end of the table 1 pay chart, the increase at that time was $444. Now it's $464. If you look at that last column where it says most prevalent step, that's the increase that we got in the last contract from O to P. And it's not even fully fixed in this contract with the $1,000 upgrade. Because if you take $444, which we got in the last contract, and now we got an additional $1,000, that's still only $1,444, and each step in the table 2 chart should be at least $2,000. So we still left money on the table in that case. But the consolidation of the pay charts happens naturally anyway, because 99% plus of our people are already at the top of the pay scale. And the way the structure is in table 1 and table 2 is that you get to the same point. So step P in table 1 and step P in table 2 is exactly the same. So the consolidation, if we were to use the structure in table 1 with a higher starting pay and front loading our raises, that would be a lot more money than using the structure in table 2, which is what's in this tentative agreement, which still starts off too low and takes a long time to get to the top. Now, it will be reduced by 96 weeks because you take away the steps at the bottom, steps A and B. I mean, it's not nothing. That's,
Yeah, it is nothing.
no, it's something. It's 96 weeks less. Is it what we want? I mean, look, let me say this about the step increases. And there's been a lot of discussion about should I apply, when I'm looking at this contract, should I apply a raise that I'm going to get based on the percent in the COLA, or should I look at additionally the step increases that I'm going to get? And there's definitely an argument to look at the step increases because that's negotiated. You don't automatically get step increases. If you reset the whole thing, you don't automatically get any type of step increase. But the fact of the matter is, we would like step increases that occur more often. And quite frankly, every minute, every day, every week that I'm not at top step, the post office is winning. So if you're looking at what your pay is in one contract to the next, you really want to look at the top step, and then you want to look at how long is it going to take me to the top step, and what is my pay going to be at each step therein. And that's an apples to apples comparison. And if you look at that, once again, going back to the inflation thing, the 1.3 and the cost of living doesn't put us any higher in our pay, and it doesn't get us any closer to getting to top step, except for the people that are coming after us. Because people that'll be new hires coming, that will be an advantage because they will get to the top quicker than what a current letter carrier gets to the top as. So that is something to factor in, and that is a pro, that is a positive in this contract, the taking off of the 96 weeks. Now, one negative on that, to me it's minor, but it's been brought up, is that because step P went up by $1,000 and step C didn't go up by $1,000, the difference between C and P is greater now, and that means that when you have the cost of living allowance that is prorated, the actual percent of the cost of living at each step is going to be slightly lower. I think when the DAS award, it was 62.5% of the top. And if you look at the percent to step O in table 2 there, it's gone down a little bit. It starts off at 61.14%. in this new contract, step C right now is at 66.6%, but it'll be a little bit less. They haven't put out the pay chart yet, but it's 66%. You get 66% of the number in the COLA. You're not going to get 66%. You'll probably get like 65. It'll go down a little bit because the difference between C and P is greater by $1,000. So that's just full disclosure on that. To me, it's not a major thing, but it is a significant. It is an insignificant negative in this contract that you could factor in if you want to. Monica, you got a question?
So that was one of my points, that now you watered everybody's COLA down.
Well, the COLA it was watered down in 2013, and it's the same.
So the last
You know?
steps on table one used to be 24 weeks. Now you went back to 46.
Right.
So how did that happen? Couldn't figure it out? You stayed with 23? Number one. Number two, you're chopping off 3 steps in the front, so people that carried during COVID are going to be making the same amount as people that are just walking in the door.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
That's a big problem, but of course, someone else getting more money doesn't necessarily take away your money. But if in fairness, and if we were to say no to this contract and go to arbitration, I think we would have a good argument that you have to raise everyone's pay up in the scale. So and I don't know 2 steps is enough. I think you'd have to go to 3 steps to get us at least where the APW starting pay is. And we would argue that we would go up by 2 or 3 steps, and then everyone would go up by 2 or 3 steps so that everyone's pay would go up, proportionally to what that increase is. That would make a lot more sense and be more fairer than just to say, oh, we're just going to raise the pay for the new employees coming in, which, by the way, it still doesn't raise it high enough. Let me go to, I think that's all on the pay chart I wanted to point out. Let me go back to the opening statement of the union. So you guys got the page that says NELC opening statement, February 22nd, 2023. So we began negotiations, and so I was there. The entire executive council was there. President Renfro was there as our chief, head of the negotiating team. Louis DeJoy, Postmaster General, was there, and they do the handshake across the table, and then they give their opening statements, and they say, here's what's important to us, here's what we're looking for in a new agreement. So I just wanted to read this to you guys to give you a framework, because you got to evaluate, here's what our goals were, and here's what we accomplished, and is this contract sufficient to meet our goals, yes or no? As we seek a new agreement, this is President Renfro talking. As we seek a new agreement, we will aim to preserve and improve the standard of living for the nation's city letter carriers as we always have. Don't think we accomplished that. It is our expectation that we will be able to reach voluntary agreement. However, we will not hesitate to pursue a fair agreement through binding interest arbitration if necessary. Do not know what the hesitation of 20 months was, but anyway, we'll move on. Our goals are simple. First and foremost, we must address the staffing issue that is debilitating our craft. Nationwide, letter carriers are overworked and post offices are understaffed. One obvious solution that we seek is increased wages. If the Postal Service wants to recruit and retain letter carriers, it starts with a competitive wage, plain and simple. The staffing crisis can also be addressed by shifting to an all-career workforce and abolishing the city carrier assistant position. The CCA position in its current form no longer serves the Postal Service or our craft. Overwhelming turnover is seriously undermining service. While we have made positive strides in our recent agreements to convert certain installations across the country to the all-career model, NELC seeks to convert all CCAs to career positions and make the all-career model the standard nationwide. Now, in the tentative agreement, we roll over the CCA position, completely roll it over. We said that one of our goals is to eliminate it. I would venture to say it was our primary goal. It was our number one goal going into contract negotiation. The reason being, obviously, the inherent unfairness of it, the fact that we're arguing in the front of Congress that, that we should be able to get credit for our all of our time as a letter carrier. We're saying that to Congress, but then we negotiate a contract that, we agree with the employer that these 2 years are not going to count toward your career time. That just doesn't jive, with what our goals are. But then, even more than that, looking at the future of the job and of our craft, we thought it was important to make sure that people are starting their career on the career pay scale, that they were getting credit for everything. You have, for example, a veteran's preference, right? It's in the law. If you served your country in the military, you get a preference if you want to continue to serve your country as a letter carrier and put on the blue uniform. However, because the pay is so bad and because it's a non-career position, you're not getting a lot of applicants coming out of the military. So the advantage that they would have, the preference that they would have, is not a preference at all because they don't prefer to work as a letter carrier. So that's one of the reasons. But the other reason listed in here is we have a big staffing problem. And the fact that people don't want to come to work and people don't want to keep the job and all of that has a negative impact on everybody in the workforce and has a negative impact on the service that we're able to provide to the American people. So not solving the CCA problem in this contract, just rolling over the same CCA terms, is a big problem. It's a big reason why that I think most people would conclude that the contract is insufficient. It doesn't meet the major goal that we set out when we began negotiations February 22nd of 2023. And it's not because the conditions are better now. We still have the same high turnover rate, low retention rate, staffing issues, mandatory overtime, can't get all the mail delivered, service issues. We have all of that and probably more. We just didn't solve the problem because we agreed to the rolling over the CCA classification in the new contract. CC?
So I had a question. If we go to arbitration, if we vote it down and go to arbitration, is there notes or anything that Renfro annotated during negotiations? Does that have to be put forth to the body or
No.
to the executive board? So we don't know if he negotiated actually. Like we don't know that for a fact. There's no way to know what was negotiated and how. Does anybody go in there with
No. The people that go in there with him are the people that he chooses to bring with him. And we're going back to the beginning of this conversation. We cannot rewind the clock, you guys. The negotiating process to me was horrible. It was, well,
if we send the same person in there to do the same negotiation.
Right, how do you know he's gonna do what he's supposed to do?
I don't.
He's an ass.
Look, you guys. That's something that we're not going to be able to control. We can make our voices known in a lot of different ways, letting the president know that we expect him to adhere to the bargaining goals that we set forth on February 22nd of 2023. You're not going to be able to go behind him and do that ventriloquist thing or, you can't.
How are you gonna let him know what we want him to do?
Well, if we vote this thing down, I think we should think about that. Do we want to do some type of survey? Do we want to do some type of letter writing or something? But I think, members and or branches should have their say on reasons why they voted the thing down. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. At this point, we're just here to try to figure out, do we want to vote yes or we want to vote no on the tentative agreement? We'll see. Melissa?
So, this opening statement was in February,
Thanks, sir.
by November.
Whew.
Renfro had already come off of this negotiation because he was telling us at RAP sessions that he had switched course and he said, well, there are certain conditions under which I would agree to a tentative agreement that kept the CCA. He said those conditions would be is if they received a significant wage increase, which I would say they have not. And he said the other condition is that it would be limited to a 1-year CCA category. Because I kind of argued with him about it, that wasn't even sufficient in itself. And here what we've ended up with is no change whatsoever. So I think that's something
Yeah.
that should be.
No, absolutely. You know, our main goal was to eliminate the position completely, make everyone career. President Renfro did tell us that similar to the TEs, if you guys recall, transitional employees were non-career employees, but they started at the same rate of pay as a step A career part-time flexible sub, which in 2011 and 2012 was already $22.15. The CCA pay in this contract will still not get to, at the end of the contract, in November of 2026, will still not get to $22.15, which, you know, $22.15 in today's dollars is probably closer to like $30. What's that?
Amazon making 21.
Yeah, everyone, any job in the world, for the most part, is paying $20 to start. It's not going to solve our problem of retention and or getting quality applicants to apply to be a city letter carrier. And I think I know what Bill is about to say. Go ahead, I'll let you say it.
One, as far as what is requested in our petition, garbage trailer lays out everything that happens. We have a legal ordinance.
That's correct.
Second thing is, what arguments were made? Second thing, I guess it is, is that carrot and stick is out there now on, wait, go up to 20 or 20 cents, $21, whatever. Carrot is that after this implements, they'll jump from $21 to $26 in starting pay. So look at almost a $5 raise.
More than 5, yeah.
Right, for their first over $10,000 increase, around for 1 month, 6 months, 2 years, become a career employee. That's the difference. That would be, I think that's more significant than $20 raise. If the offset was leaving them at step B there and making them at 24, then it's still not a big increase.
Right.
What about the rest of the people though?
So will that happen? What Bill is saying is that there could possibly be a better retention because there'll be a bigger light at the end of the tunnel. If someone comes in, look, if someone accepts the job, they're willing to work for $20 an hour. Putting to the side, is that the person you want out there delivering your mail and wearing the uniform? That's a separate question. But once that person comes in, it's possible that the Postal Service will be able to retain that person at a higher rate because they'll look at a significant increase of more than $5 an hour when they go from CCA to career. I still would like, there's a lot of provisions in the contract that delay the conversion from CCA to career, and they were not fixed in this contract, and I don't have a slide about that. But if you look at the full-time opportunities memorandum, so you're going to be capped at 2 years as a CCA, but you can get converted into a full-time regular position, which is a career position, prior to the 2 years if there's an opening and you're the top CCA and you fill the opening. But there's 2 significant delays in the full-time opportunities memorandum that were not fixed in this contract. One of them is that you don't get converted while the bid churn is going on. So if you have someone retire, now you're down one regular. And the language in 7.3a says that you're supposed to have 1 and 1. You're supposed to have 1 regular for every assignment, every full-time assignment that you have. So when somebody retires and leaves or somebody quits or whatever, that creates a vacancy. But the language in the full-time opportunities memorandum says that it doesn't get filled until there's a residual vacancy. The residual vacancy can take months sometimes, and then it doesn't get filled until the first day of the 3rd full pay period following when the residual vacancy occurs. So that is a hole in the contract that diminishes the value of somebody converting quicker from CCA to full-time regular career. The other thing is, if that installation is going to consider a transfer, they can consider a transfer for forever, really, just months on end, and they don't have to convert the CCA into the full-time position while they're considering a transfer. That's another hole and delay that's in the full-time opportunities memorandum. But one thing that we do have now is the all-career workforce. And President Renfro alluded to the all-career memorandum. He signed the memorandum on May 24th of 2022. This was the second memorandum. There had been a previous memorandum that applied to Northern California in the San Francisco district, you know, in that area where the cost of living is real high. And the memorandum has some flaws. Number one flaw being that the Postal Service makes the final decision on if they're going to add a particular installation into the all-career model, yes or no. But we give them a list. We ask them real nicely, and we say, hey, if you're having a problem hiring people, or you're having a problem retaining employees, or you're having a problem getting the mail delivered, maybe you would consider putting this particular office into the all-career model. So it's certainly better than nothing, right? And it's something that we could maybe build off of. And it was one of the goals that we had in collective bargaining, was to get it so that all of the offices were in the all-career model and everyone started as a career employee. The problem that we have right now is that we did not include this memorandum in the new agreement. So if you look at the summary of the tentative agreement, there's a list toward the back of it of all of the memorandums that were either revised or are going to be rolled over and included into the new tentative agreement. And this memorandum, which is titled, go back up here, City Delivery Staffing Adjustment, Hiring PTF Letter Carriers, right? PTF City Letter Carriers. This memorandum is not included in the list of memorandums that are part of the tentative agreement. And you go down to the bottom here, and it says in the last, second to last paragraph, the last line of the second to last paragraph says either party may terminate the agreement in its entirety by providing 30 days written notice to the other party. So if the Postal Service decides at any point, or let's say you get a new president in and, you know, that president wants to kind of, you know, cut costs in the Postal Service, and that president looks at some agreements that they have to pay us all career in certain offices and says, wait a second, we don't have a contract with the NELC that says we have to include these offices in all career model. We can just simply opt out. And the post office would, if the post office opts out in all of those offices, they would go back to hiring CCAs. I think the ones that are, I don't know the answer to that, what happens to the ones that are there, but I think the ones that were there would keep their status. I don't think you go backwards, but going forward, all the hiring would be CCAs at the $20 an hour versus the career employees at the new improved rate of $26 an hour. This to me is unacceptable. I think that if, you know, with us agreeing to the CCA classification, we can at least say, well, at least in a lot of our installations, and not nearly enough of them, but at least a lot of our installations, we have the all-career model, but we didn't at least make sure that the offices that are currently in the all-career model will remain there throughout the length of the contract. To me, that's just makes it, it's unacceptable to me, but anyway. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I'd like to go back a couple of steps back. This route adjustment. They cut all these routes, which they're gonna do out of these offices. Would that start a change to layoffs?
Possibly, but if we lose routes, you know, you have the layoff protection in the tentative agreement, which is after 6 years, and you know you have an auxiliary workforce, particularly CCAs that they would have to let go of first. So I'm not sure that, you know, I don't think we've had a layoff in the history of our craft ever. So I'm not sure if, you know, now would be the first time we'd start having them, but that would be the, you know, that'd be where you're at. What was put in there? You know, every time we go into contract negotiations, the Postal Service wants to get rid of the no layoff clause. We want the no layoff clause to apply across the board, meaning that as soon as you become a career carrier, you're protected. And because it's never been implemented, I can't say it's a negative the way it's written with the 6-year thing, but
Understand that?
I don't know the answer to that. The clerks, do they have it? Do you know the answer?
No, I don't.
I don't know. You have to look in their article on that to see if it's the same as ours or not. Mr. Jackson? Yes. Yes. Right.
Or, and you do route adjustment, I would assume that in that process, you would make more emphasis on 38. At line 21,
Yeah, listen, I know you guys want to talk about that, and we'll get to that in 1 second. I don't know if I pretty much agree with Bill. I don't think it's going to be that significant, although I don't like it, and I don't understand why we would give anything up without anything in return, and why we would project a loss into some future memorandum. But anyway, before we get there, let's look at the uniform allowance. So we bargained over the uniform allowance in Article 26. Traditionally, the uniform increase is 2.5% per year. And I was just able to pull up a catalog from 2018, so just pulled a year out of whatever. But you can see the prices in 2018 versus the current price. Well, that's, maybe you're getting a better price, I don't know. But basically, that's kind of like what stuff costs, right? So if you look at the increases, it's about 170% increase in the cost of uniforms. And in 2018, it was $452 per year, 2.5% each year, 2.5% in the current agreement, because in 2023, there was no raise under the tentative agreement. 2023, no raise. 2024, no raise. 2025, there'll be a 7.5% raise, bringing us from $499 to $536, and then another 2.5% raise from 2025 to 2026, May of 2026. Now you're up to $549, which is, consistent with 2.5% raise every single year. So in that time frame, it's about a 20% increase in the uniform allowance, and while it's a 170% increase in the cost of uniforms, there is a memorandum that was rolled over into this contract, meaning that it existed in the current contract, in the previous contract. In the tentative agreement, they rolled over the exact same language, which says we're going to study a process by which you would get your uniforms in a different way. Like maybe there would be a centralized vendor, maybe there would be a quartermaster system, and you just get your uniforms, or whatever that the parties could come up with that would be more efficient, that would save money, etc. But in the meantime, and this to me is, I hate it. In the meantime, you, the city letter carrier, will bear the additional cost of the uniforms while the parties figure out, which they've already had 20 months to figure it out and haven't come up with nothing. You will bear the cost because while the cost of the uniforms has gone up to 170%, they're not giving you 170% increase in your uniform allowance. So logically speaking, right, the post office requires us to be in uniform. They have regulations about being in uniform, and it's really a simple equation. Here's how much money you need on your allowance in order for you to be in uniform. So if that number is $1,000 a year or $1,200 a year or at least $800 a year, give us that now while you study the problem and come up with a solution. Don't give us a lesser amount that we can't afford to buy our uniforms with and then say you got to be in full uniform. But it's okay because we're going to keep studying the problem and we hope to have a solution for you sometime soon. Let the damn employer pay the additional cost for what it costs to put us in uniform, not the letter carrier having to come out of pocket in order for me to be in uniform and to look like a professional letter carrier out there. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that to you guys' attention. Monica.
Does it say somewhere in our contract that the post office will supply everything we need to do our job
No.
Yes, it does.
Oh, if it talks about equipment, but uniforms are separate in Article 26. But to your point, Monica, this is a very legitimate argument that we can make in front of an arbitrator. Now, to me, there's
How
a
did he not walk in with this?
there's a few. I know.
Come on.
There's a few things that we can argue in front of an arbitrator that I think we have a good chance of succeeding at least on one or more of those things. One is the elimination of the non-career workforce because it doesn't work. It's not getting quality applicants. It doesn't give you the veterans preference because the veterans don't prefer to get the job. The parties have already agreed to the all-career model in a lot of installations. We have a lot of arguments for eliminating the CCA position. If we lose that as a backup, we could ask for the same thing that the T's used to have, which was a starting pay equivalent to the start of the new career employees. Another fallback, reduce the time you spend as a CCA from 2 years to 1 year or something like that. There's a lot of ways we can make improvements there. The other thing we can definitely make improvements, I think, is in step increases across the board or raises equivalent with inflation across the pay scale, not just at the lower part of the pay scale. I think we can make a good argument for that we should be paid comparable to UPS drivers and that you'd have to raise our pay a lot more than what the clerks are getting. That's another argument we can make. I think the uniforms, you got to give us the amount of money that it costs to be in uniform and you work it out and then improve upon it. That would be fine. But in the meantime, you have to give us the cost of uniforms. And then I think we can make a legitimate argument for interest on the back pay. And there's a slide in here that shows you the back pay amounts. And there it goes. The back pay amounts are based on, so if we were to agree to the tentative agreement, we would get back pay for all the time that we were underpaid while they were negotiating the tentative agreement. And that time would be the cost of living allowance at the end of 2023. That would be the general wage increase of 1.3% in November of 2023. That would be 2 cost of living allowances in 2024. That would be the general wage increase that would be in November of this year. And then assuming that they set the pay scale prior to the cost of living allowance in the beginning of next year, then that would just roll into your pay. You would get back pay. We're dealing with the post office, right? What, about 6 months, 8 months, 2 years? How long is it taking them to get us our money, right? All of that time, you will get paid. These amounts are based on 40 hours, so they will probably be higher than the amount that's up on the screen. But the amount will not be included any interest on the back pay. But the post office has been holding our money for almost 2 years, and interest rates are high now. I mean, traditionally we haven't gotten interest on back pay in contracts, but the world has changed. The interest rate is a lot higher today and was a lot higher in 2023 than what it has been traditionally. I think this is a legitimate argument we can make that interest should be paid at the federal judgment rate, just like it says in the ELM 436, which is already language built into one of the USPS manuals that says that if they owe you back pay, they'll pay interest on the back pay at the federal judgment rate. So that's another place where I think we can make some improvement if we vote this thing down and force arbitration.
Don't you normally get hit hard, taxes that you pay on that back pay?
You get hit harder in the particular pay period that, actually you don't. They go back and figure the taxes based on if your pay was adjusted during that particular pay period. So it kind of, the tax part balances out, and in the end, the tax part will all wash out. Yes.
Because like over this last year.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Some funds, we might have paid 20%
Yeah.
money over the last year. And not just our own money, but the money
how much money, how much was our money worth that the post office was holding on to instead of giving to us? It's not zero. You know, it's something. So that's something in addition to that. It's another reason why, in my opinion, we can vote this thing down and argue for some improvements when and if we go to arbitration. So that concludes the slides, I think. Went over all of them, did I? All right. I thank Tyrone for helping me out with all that. Thank Bill for helping me out with a couple of them. And now at this time, it is, 4 o'clock? So whatever questions you guys have about anything else in the tentative agreement, you know, I will answer any questions or talk about any of that. And I'll go to you first, even though you weren't first up. But Andre had talked a couple times already. But go ahead, brother.
Based on 40 hours of work per week, it was ratified. Does that mean that any overtime we work, will we be getting back pay on that?
Yes. Yeah, so they'll go back and recalculate the rate of pay as it should have been. And if that was an overtime hour, they'll calculate the overtime pay based on the rate of pay, what it should have been. In theory, they would go back and recalculate people that have retired and give them a lump sum for the amount that they missed out on while they were still an employee, and recalculate their annuity, but that requires OPM to do that. And we still have people that are saying that OPM still hasn't recalculated their annuity from the last contract that we ratified in March or April of 2021. So that's a negative. Also, people that have left the post office, they were being underpaid while they were an employee, right? I don't think there's any provision for them to get their money either. So the post office did really well in dragging this thing out. You know, I don't think that this is a good tentative agreement, but had we, you know, at least we should have been presented with this tentative agreement, you know, last summer, so we could have considered it in real time. The fact that we let this thing drag out for so long was definitely in favor of the Postal Service. Yep, they held on to our money, and there's really no way to get that back. You can't make people whole. We had people that quit the job because they're like, this job sucks. Maybe if their pay was higher, they wouldn't have quit. Who knows? But you can't rewind the clock. There's just one more reason why next time around we gotta do this in a much more efficient way. If this is the best that the post office can come up with, then we need to make one of two decisions. Either let's vote on this as a union, this is the best we're going to get from the Postal Service, or let's just decide to go to arbitration. And what the president did by dragging this thing on for many, many months, to me, is negligence. It's negligent because it put us, the letter carriers, the members of the union, in a much worse position without any gain whatsoever. Sorry for the long answer. Andre? Okay, so one is the elimination of the 10-hour preference. And so right now, you can sign the overtime desire list and you can indicate a preference of working 10 hours or up to 12 hours. And if it comes to it, you can still be worked up to 12 hours and the 10 hours is just a preference. But there are a lot of places around the country that do have an active 10-hour list, and those are people that just want to work up to 10 hours. And management distributes the overtime in that way that is satisfying to them. We just gave that up in this contract. Now, I don't know how many people that affects, but we just gave it up. In the tentative agreement, there is no 10-hour preference. What there is a new overtime list. And this I like. And this is, I think somebody mentioned, was one of our bargaining goals. And this was achieved in this way, that there will be 2 overtime desire lists and or a work assignment list. So if you're on work assignment, it will be the same as it is right now. If you're on the overtime desire list, you can get on the NSDA overtime desire list, and you have the opportunity to get on the regular day overtime desire list up to 12 hours. So in that, the equitability would be if you're on amongst all of the people that are on the NS day overtime list, how many NS days did you work during that quarter versus the other people that are on the NS day overtime, in that group, right? Not in that group, but in the whole installation, or in whatever you guys have bargained as your group in the overtime desire list. The other group is how many hours or how many opportunities did the people get on a regular scheduled day, overtime hours, penalty overtime hours, or whatever. So there'll be up to 3 lists, and that's how they'll be administered under the terms of the tentative agreement.
So there won't be no, so if you work, say I work 12 hours, I can't come in on the next day.
So if you can get on either one of the lists or both of the lists, right? If you get on both of them, you're good. If you get on both of them, it's just like it is now, meaning that you want any overtime that's available. You could also choose to get on one list or the other. If you're a person that says, I like to come in on my NS day, I can get on that list. If I'm a type of person where I need my NS day off, but I'm willing to work overtime on a regular scheduled day, then I can get on that list. But you still have the option to get on both lists. That's not a problem. Or you can get on neither of the lists and get on the work assignment list. You can't get on the work assignment list and one of the other lists. You'll have to choose. You have to choose between the work assignment and one or both of the overtime desired lists. Tanisha. Okay, so there's a new provision in there that says that a ODL carrier can volunteer to work past 12 hours. There's another provision that says that the rate of pay for somebody who works past 12 hours will be 2.5 times their base pay. So double time and a half. So if you volunteer, you would get the additional pay rate. If you don't volunteer, there's a provision that says you have the right to go home without being subject to discipline for going home once you've reached the 12-hour work hour limit. Yes, I think we had that before, but we didn't have a specific contract language that said that specific, we didn't have, we had a national award on the subject, and it was applicable for sure, but we didn't have a specific contract language that said, that said that specifically, that you can go home. Right.
Does the NS day one, do they have to work up to 12 if they work their NS day?
They can.
No, so if you're on your NS day, if you're just on the NS day list, then that's not up to 12, that's just 8 hours.
8 hours.
If you're on both lists, though, you could then work up to 12.
So if you're on the NS day list, you don't have to work overtime the rest of the week.
If you're on the NS day, you do not have to work overtime, except for in the case of mandatory overtime, which is still going to be a problem, and probably more of a problem in this contract. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Mike, there's the language about right of refusal. It's what we usually call it, but I'm not a fan of it because the way it's expressed is that a full-time regular, so has the right to refuse overtime when they reach the work hour limits in 85G, so 12 and 60. Well, we've been working towards getting right of refusal for non-ODLs on 85F. In one of my offices, we just got right of refusal for CCAs from an arbitrator, and I feel like when you say a non-ODL has right of refusal, and they get to 11.5 hours for the day, you're basically saying the contrapositive, they're bears an inference is true, which is that you don't have the right of refusal until you get to that point, which.
And you.
We did have the right to refuse once past 85
And the same thing would go for, because it says full-time carriers, the same logic would go for a CCA or PTF that wants to go home after 11 and a half. You don't have that same language applicable to them. You still have the same 432.32 language, but you don't have the same language in Article 8.
So what Bill said, yeah, I appreciate that after 12 hours, it's already going to be the 50% and you get that automatically, and I don't see that as a bad thing, but we're getting additional 50%. A lot of offices in our district, or if you work a non-ODL past 85F, we got a bunch of offices getting an extra 50 or even an extra 100% for that amount. And for a CCA or a non-ODL, they're getting 50% past 11 and a half. So if they're not going to get that money until 12, are we going to end up in this endless argument as to whether or not, or does that apply to the non-ODLs? Is a non-ODL not going to get 50% at 11 and a half anymore? Or
No,
is the CCA going to get automatically 50% at 11 and a half?
No, they would not. There's no, the pay provision is in Article 8. So all of this language is in Article 8, and I try to put it up on the screen, but Article 8 doesn't apply to PTFs and CCAs.
I understand that. I guess I'm just saying it feels like it's going to undermine some of the things that we've been working towards for a long time here, and we're getting these extra pay provisions. If you do a full rewrite of some of the contractual language, which obviously we haven't seen what it actually says yet, which I think should be a little disturbing at this point, a month out. But
We haven't seen the actual contract language, and we haven't seen the JCAB interpretation, because to your point, 85F says that you can't be required to work beyond, in one example, is you can't be required to work beyond 10 hours. So what do you do with language that's contract language that says if you're not on the list, you can't be required to work past 10 hours, but the new contract language is going to say for non-ODL, and I put it up on the screen, for non-ODL and work assignment carriers, this means that they may clock out and leave when reaching 11 and a half hours of work in a day or 60 hours in a service week. So it doesn't give you the right to punch out when you reach the limits in 8.5F. It sets a new limit for, or appears to set a new limit for non-ODL full-time regulars. Question?
My understanding with those towns that I was reading from, they were saying even if you go 12, as long as Andre don't go past his 60 limit, they could ask for volunteers that's not on the ODL. Tell Andre, hey, not past your 60, so it's not a violation.
Correct.
So that's new, isn't it?
No, that's always been the case. So they've never had to, in your scenario, Andre is on the ODL, and Andre is still with, once Andre reaches the work hour limit, 12 or 60, they can go to him and they say, do you want to volunteer to work more? And if you do, we'll pay you 2.5%, 2.5 times your rate of pay. But they don't have to go to Andre and do that. What they could do is force someone who's not on the ODL to work mandatory overtime. And what's going to happen probably more often is that as people are volunteering and working more hours at the beginning of the week, they're going to reach a point where they'll be in guaranteed status and they won't be at work at all. And then who's going to deliver the mail in that type of scenario where you have that staffing issue that requires them to work the ODL so many hours? Now they go to the other people that are not on the list, and now the mandatory overtime is still there. We did nothing to address mandatory overtime, and you could argue that we made it worse with these changes. And the whole point to Article 8 is that you should have a reasonable expectation that one, you should have a job that pays you enough, so that you can work 8 hours and go home. But two, if you're able to organize your life in a way where you're able to get enough money and you can go home after 8 hours. You should be able to do that in almost all scenarios, maybe with the exception of overtime on your own assignment. That's always been kind of a thing, but overtime on someone else's assignment, that should have been eliminated in the contract, and it wasn't. The rural carriers already have it in their contract where they can't be required to work overtime on someone else's assignment. And I just think that's something we could definitely have gotten, but we did not bargain for it in this tentative agreement.
So now that this is in here, can I agree with that?
What are you trying to grieve?
The scenario he said. Keep asking if they don't use the ODL. They volunteer to have to make volunteer that's not on the ODL.
No.
Can I agree
So you will not be able to grieve it any more than you will be able to grieve it now. So once a person reaches 12 and 60 that's on the ODL, the Postal Service does not have to use that person. They can if that person volunteers. But if they decide as the manager that they're going to go to the non-ODL and invoke 85D mandatory overtime instead of asking you to volunteer, that would be their choice. Right now, it's the same scenario. Right now, they have to go to the other person. They can't go to you. But in the new scenario, they could go to you and ask to volunteer, or they could just go and invoke mandatory overtime. Melissa, then it'll come here.
Another hazard I see in this, where they invoke this language if the carrier volunteers to work over 12.
Yes.
Because I can see a scenario where I let them know it's gonna take me over 12, they tell me, well, I'm not gonna help. And if I don't bring that mail back to the office at 12 and tell them I'm not doing it, I have in effect volunteered to work over 12. And, because we know that we have carriers who are averse to confrontation with the boss, pissing them off, and they're just gonna go over the 12.
They just assign it to them and whatever, right? Yeah.
So when we don't have any parameters of what does volunteering look like, does it only come into play if the ODL is maxed at 12? Some of these parameters aren't, it's not stipulated, which generally means that then management is going to use it. They already say that people volunteer.
Well, what nobody has said yet is that we've developed, very serious remedies for management violating the work hour limits. And, Jim pointed out some of the problems for the 85F work hour limits and or the M432.32 work hour limits that we may or may not be able to enforce them in the same way. But the regular work hour limit that we normally enforce is the 8.5G, 12 and 60. It's no longer a violation. And I think that's your concern, that they'll figure out a way to technically not violate, the new provision. Whereas before it was a clear violation every time a person went past 12 hours in a day or 60 hours in a week. Now it's going to be unclear whether or not that's a violation. And if it's not determined to be a violation, all that extra money you've been getting in grievances, you're not going to get because it's not a violation.
We have like 100% they exceed those 85F
Right.
more, and some remedies as well that go with that. And those are the actual limits. Someone who's not on the ODL, their limits are no penalty overtime ever, basically.
It should be.
We would sum it up.
Right.
But now we put this language in here that says, oh no, their limit is 11 and a half hours, which prior to this, the only time their limit was 11 and a half hours was during the December exclusion.
So I kind of have two parts to this.
It's a two-parter.
Yeah, the first one is kind of building off what you were saying. What's going to be the remedy for these smaller offices that we have these carriers on the workroom floor? There's only one carrier. You have, say, two supervisors that are bullying, harassing the carriers to volunteer. How do you remedy that when we're being forced into this? I feel like a lot of times it's their word against ours. So what's going to be the remedy for volunteering, but you're not volunteering?
Well, one solution, and we'll have to see how that plays out, but one solution would be like, let's say you utilize a 3996 and you put on there, you know, not volunteering to work beyond, you know, this time or whatever, force them to respond to it. I don't know. I mean, what's tough to me is in the smaller offices where you have more mandatory overtime, because if you know, if you have like 2 routes and one person's not there, it's like it don't matter if the person's on the ODL or not. It's like whoever's still breathing and, you know, in the place. So we've always had that issue of mandatory overtime, and I think it's going to be exacerbated by the new terms of the tentative agreement. But as far as that, you know, our members they do have a right to punch out after 12 hours or after 60, and they're going to have to invoke that right. So, you know, we're just going to have to educate them and let them know that they will not be disciplined if they do that, and they should invoke that right. Absolutely. Second part, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. The second part was, I feel like with these new overtime rules, if they go into effect, rather more of a concern, I feel like it's gonna cost us our routes. There's gonna be those carriers that are constantly volunteering to go over 12 and 60. That, I mean, what's that doing? That's giving management the
Yeah.
to not fill full-time positions that you can fill, you know, giving them the right to not hire more CCAs,
No doubt.
TFs, and help.
It's very concerning. So the NELC was very active in the 8-hour workday movement back in 1889, I think it was. You know, the Haymarket riots and, you know, all the stuff that led to establishing the 8-hour workday. You know, say 8 hours of work, 8 hours of recreation, 8 hours of sleep, and, you know, that was the standard. And man, this job for most of us is not an 8-hour day anymore. And these terms are slipping us further and further away from what should be the goal, is an 8-hour day and get paid enough money where you can support your family off of that and go home and have work-life balance and have a decent life. And these provisions don't help with that for sure. I think it will, you know, it will hurt us on the number. It will hurt us on the staffing end. Instead of forcing the employer to properly staff the place, we're giving them more and more outs when they don't staff the place properly. You good? Okay. Jim?
This is a little bit more obscure of a question, but there's some language in about the tentative agreement that suggests some sort of changes to the DRP process, but it's completely cryptic and doesn't really say what those changes are going to be. Has President Renfro elaborated on that?
He has not elaborated too much at the RAP sessions, but when we were out in DC on October the 19th, he showed us on the screen the language of the new DRP memorandum. What I could see, and I didn't have it in front of me, so I couldn't really look at it closely, it's a 7-page memorandum that basically combines all of the language in 2 other memorandums and really only updates stuff like, instead of having the area manager of labor relations being the point person, it's the field rep, you know, whatever, you know, so stuff like that. Other than that, I didn't see any changes in it, but I couldn't tell you that for sure because it was just up on the screen. But I think the main takeaway on that is that they're not following the terms of the DRP memorandum today, and there's been no significant upgrades in the DRP memorandum, and all of the problems we're having with the delay in grievances and the contract compliance and stuff like that, and not, you know, the Postal Service not taking their responsibility in the Article 15 grievance process seriously, those problems are going to continue to get worse because we haven't negotiated any better language on that. But I don't think it's going to be any worse either, if that helps you. But like you said, we got to see the actual language when it comes out. Sometime this month, brother. Sometime this month, we think. Question?
So something else I wanted to point out was, in addition to these COLAs that we're getting, these projected COLAs, online a lot of people have been calling them diet.
The Diet Cola, yeah.
Because they're not the full.
So the technical term is a proportional COLA.
Okay, proportional COLA, our 1.3% big argument has been we're not being proportionate with inflation. Something else I wanted to point out is our health benefit prices are going up, aren't they?
Yes. So that is, you know, I don't know how health insurance costs factor into inflation. So obviously they already factor in, but that's something specifically that we bargain over, right? And we bargain over the percent of how much, you know, how much percent we're going to pay and how much the employer is going to pay. And it's an aggregate of 72% for them and 28% for us. And that didn't go up in this contract. However, that because healthcare costs are rising, the actual out-of-pocket cost for us is going to be more, and you're gonna take home less in your paycheck. And that's one more factor that, you know, if your pay doesn't keep up with inflation and you have to pay more out of your paycheck in addition to that, you know, it's not generally a good deal. Go ahead, brother.
Can I ask you a question about the charges that were brought against Renfro? Over?
Certainly.
Yeah, with that?
We are not at a second step yet. So the first step, well, I guess we're at so I delivered the charges to Executive Vice President Paul Barner, and he has to send a registered letter to President Renfro. And I don't know if he's done that yet or if President Renfro has even received the charges yet. And then he will appoint an investigator. And that will be that'll be the third step. So I think we're still at step 1. We might be at step 2, but I haven't received any word that we're even at step 2 yet.
Not negotiate for us after this contract?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but I don't think it's a likely outcome, so I didn't want to even bring it up. But it's possible. So, you know, through the charging process, the investigator is named. That investigator's report would go to the executive council. The executive council could make a decision at that time to remove President Renfro and or maybe, you know, some other thing that would remove him out of the collective bargaining process. Like, for example, he could be suspended for the length of time until we get a new contract. So therefore, everyone's concerns, at least in this room, that he would be in charge of the arbitration process. Maybe that would be alleviated if he was suspended for that period of time. So that's a possible outcome. I wouldn't say it's a likely outcome, but I'd say it's a possible outcome. Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's negligent the way he handled the negotiations, and it just doesn't bode well for us. But it is what it is at this point. We have to determine if this contract is acceptable to us or not. And just keep in mind, everyone, as you're voting, if you go in there and you vote yes to this contract, you're saying that the terms are acceptable to us as letter carriers. Next time we go to negotiate a contract with the Postal Service and we say, it's not good enough. And they're going to say, it was good enough for you last time, you know. So I think that there's a real argument to be made that if this is insufficient, you should vote this thing down and roll the dice at arbitration, although we do not know the outcome. But it's something that just we kind of have to stand on principle and make the message known that this is not sufficient. You know, the terms in here that don't keep up with inflation and keep letter carriers being paid $20 an hour in non-career is just not something that we can accept. Melissa.
Part of the reason we've agreed to collective bargaining is to keep labor peace. The workforce are becoming disgruntled. And when the workforce, if we vote this down in a resounding fashion, says this is not acceptable, I do not believe that an arbitrator is going to force something actually worse down our throats. Because an arbitrator is supposed to take those things into consideration. Are we going to have a
Yeah, no, and it's a great point because the arbitration process that's in the Postal Reorganization Act is in lieu of us going out on strike, right? Don't go out on strike. You will have the right to go in front of a neutral arbitrator and get a fair contract. And if we state unequivocally that this contract is insufficient, I do agree with you that would weigh on the neutral arbitrator and force some movement in that direction. And if history is our guide, it only happened one time, but in 1978, they agreed to a tentative agreement that had a capped COLA, and that was a time of rampant inflation. And the members of the NELC voted that thing down, and they went back in front of an arbitrator, with a two in front of an arbitrator, and they got the COLA uncapped, and they were able to win that in 1978. So we'll see what happens. No, I don't think the outcome of the presidential election will affect us at arbitration. I do think it will affect us on some of the terms of the contract, as I alluded to earlier. You better get your shit in black and white if you want it to stick with the new president coming in and what he has said about the Postal Service in the past. Yeah. It's all going to be on the table again. Absolutely. Right. Take away the supplement. All that's going to be on the table again. But as far as the contract, the contract, it comes under the terms of the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970, and I don't see the president intervening in that in any, whoever was the president. What else you guys got? I'll stay here all night. All right. Well, question. What is it? Oh, go ahead, brother. I thought you knew what his question was.
So we're not allowed to strike.
Well, we weren't allowed to strike in 1970 either, just so you know.
Right.
It wasn't like it was legal then.
So in Article 16, it talks about immediate work stoppage.
Article 16 of the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
It specifically talks about the president having the option to call for a work stoppage, and President Renfro has already indicated that he would not be taking that option under any circumstances. So,
Has that ever happened in the past?
I think that President Sombrado threatened to invoke that in the early 80s, but I don't think that there was ever a legitimate work stoppage other than 1970 for those 8 days in March.
Why the contract, why he chose November instead of
For the expiration of the contract, this is going to be a 42-week contract, so 3.5 years, and it would end in November of 2026. His reasoning is that, and I think it's sound reasoning, is that if the pay increases, general wage increases are going to be every November, it makes sense that you would want the contract to expire at that time, so that then when you go into negotiations for the next contract, then you would be negotiating from day one. Like in this contract, for example, in the tentative agreement, it expired May 20th of 2023, but our first general wage increase is still not until November of 2023. So if we get into a new contract negotiating period, let's say the next wage increase could potentially be November of 2026, and it would start on day one of the new 2026 contract. So that's the reasoning he's given, and I don't see any flaw in that myself. Yeah, November was normal. I don't know. I don't know why they got off of that, and whatever. But one of the things that is always bargained about is the length of the contract. And if we think that inflation is going to be high, let's see. If the Postal Service thinks inflation is going to be high, then they want a shorter contract, and vice versa. In other words, you're going to predict the economic situation, and if you think that the wages that you're getting today are going to appear to be low in a couple of years, then you want a short contract. So you can say, hey, we'll take this contract now, but we want to be able to bargain for more money, you know, and the post office looks at the opposite. So there's always a tug of war on the length of the contract. So this one, we've had 36 months, we've had 48 months, I think we've had like 54 months, but this one sat, at least per the tentative agreement, is 42 months. So Cheryl, any more questions? No, Cheryl left.
I think we're fine now.
Hey, think so?
Yeah, one more.
Scour the room.
So you were at the rap session with, President Renfro.
I was at 4 of them.
Did he seem to be happy with the contract that he?
Yeah, I mean he didn't exactly pat himself on the back, but his opinion is that he negotiated a contract for us that is the best that we're going to get. If you kind of listen to him real closely, I think what he's really saying is this is the best contract that the Postal Service is willing to give us, and that may be true, you know. But I don't equate a contract that the Postal Service is willing to give us to a contract that either we deserve or that we could attain through arbitration. But obviously he negotiated the terms, and you know, he thinks that he got us the best possible terms that he could. It's up to us to, you know, say we agree or we disagree. We'll see how that plays out.
Could work in our favor too.
Yeah, man. If it was me, I'd be like, man, I thought it was decent, but my people, they said no way, so you have to do a little better than this, you know? I didn't hear him say that was a reason for the delay, but it may have been in his mind, because he thought that we could negotiate better terms if we were able to convince the Biden administration to transfer money that should have been allocated to the Postal Service when they went from CSRS to FERS. There was monies that should have went into the post office bank account that instead went into the federal government's bank account. And we think that they should transfer that money with interest now, and it'd be a significant amount of money. And if they did that, then we would be in a better bargaining position, or at least the Postal Service would be more willing to give us the pay raises that we deserve, I guess. But it never materialized, and I couldn't say that that he was waiting on that. No, I don't know that. Q.
At the rap session in DC, were you able to ask questions?
So I tried to let the president run the rap sessions in all of them. And so in the first one was in Houston, and I waited until the end so everyone could ask whatever question they want. And there was a couple of things that had just not been covered. So I figured I'd go to the mic, and that's when he said, "No, you're not here to ask questions." And I'm like, "The hell am I here for?" You know. So anyway, he turned off the mic, and then he turned it back on. So that was okay, I guess. Then we went to San Francisco, and in San Francisco, he kind of said the same thing, like, "You're not here to answer, ask questions." And one of the other people at the rap session was the president of Branch 70 in San Diego, Ricardo Guzman, and he went to another one of the mics, and he's like, "You don't tell us what to do, and you work for us, and if this brother got something to say, he's gonna say it." And that was it. I was like, all right, cool. So then in San Francisco, it kind of worked out. I had a couple of things I wanted to bring up. And then in Minneapolis, I thought that he had kind of got over that whole thing of, "I'm going to tell you guys you can't talk" thing. So I did the same thing. I kind of waited to the end to see what was discussed and what wasn't discussed. And at that time, I think that's the audio clip that everyone heard where he ended up turning off the mic, and I was like, wow, we're going to do this again, but okay. So I was not able to bring up those things in Minneapolis. So instead of banging my head up against the wall, I figured I would try to be a little bit smarter. And in DC, I went ahead and just printed out some of the things that I thought were, not being discussed from the podium, but were definitely significant for the people in the audience to know. And I printed it out and I just handed it out to everyone as they came in. And then I didn't go to the microphone in DC. So anyway, that's how it played out. I think the president spent about $250,000 of your dues money trotting the executive council and other people that work for the NELC out to all these rap sessions, just for the photo op of us sitting up on the stage, you know, with him, because we were told we had no role in the thing. I mean, anyway, we didn't have a role in the collective bargaining process either. So what were we there for?
I would say this, at the Minneapolis rap session, Mike did wait, he waited to me, he got up once and was like, no, you can ask me. I said, okay, that's what I was trying to do. He waited for everybody to ask me a question. He went up to the microphone, Brian instantly got mad. Instantly got mad. In my opinion, he turned into, no, you can't do this. You should know this. You're a business agent. Cut his mic off, the rap session over with. Cut it off. It's over with. He started packing up everything, and that was it. He instantly, it was ridiculous. In my opinion. What's the point in trotting the whole executive board around to all these rap sessions, spending the money just for, to me, was a photo op if nobody's up there gonna say nothing or if they was asking questions, you just want to talk. But Mike can't get out to talk, then you don't want to ask the question. Well, you already asked this in San Francisco. I wasn't in San Francisco. I want to know what the question
Right.
was.
You and everyone else was new to that room that had not heard whatever question or commentary happened at the other rap session. And, you know, if it's relevant, and like I say, the things I was bringing up, I think were very relevant. And they should have been discussed so that the members could make a legitimate determination of whether we want to vote this contract up or down. So anyway, I appreciate that, brother. You know, I'm here to serve you and everyone else. So it didn't hurt my feelings too bad.
Thank you for letting us ask questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting us ask questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I was dressed up in my Halloween. I was Anger from the movie Inside Out, and that did confuse a lot of people in the audience. they did not know what to make of that. All right, good people. I see people getting up and leaving, so that's our cue. I think that's it. But thank you guys for your time. Bring the information back. We'll post the whole thing on YouTube, and you guys can share it that way for whoever wants to listen in or see how the thing went. And once we get more information on the ballots, we'll let you guys know. Everyone be safe out there. Happy Veterans Day to all the veterans tomorrow. And have a great evening, you guys.